Hi, it's Taylor T. Carlson, and I'm back with another video for you. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. This, of course, was the second and final Zelda game on the NES, following up the original Legend of Zelda. By this point, the evil wizard Ganon has been defeated, but many of his followers still live, and they want to bring their evil lord back to life. Meanwhile, Link learns a strange secret about the family that Zelda comes from. Apparently, the Zelda that he rescued was not the original Princess Zelda, and she's been sleeping for centuries, having had a sleeping spell cast on her, and over the years they named all of their princesses Zelda. He finds out that if he wants to awaken the original Princess Zelda, he has to find the third Triforce, the Triforce of Courage. The Triforce of Courage is hidden in the Great Palace out a long ways away in Hyrule, and to get there, he has to go to the 6 other temples, putting a crystal into the stone statue after he defeats the guardian of each temple. At this point, he can go to the Great Palace and try to attain the Triforce of Courage so that he can awaken the original Princess Zelda and break the curse. One of the first things you'll notice about Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is that it's a radically different game from its predecessor. You still go around on an overhead map, but that's only used for exploring. The actual portions of action in this game are in side-scrolling areas, so whenever you encounter an enemy, when you wander off the road, whenever you go into a cave, whenever you enter one of the temples, whenever you step onto a square that's a battle area, you'll go into this side-scrolling mode and fight your way through. There's a live system, and if you run out of your lives, of course, it's game over, and you go back to the North Castle at the beginning of the game. Throughout the game, you can find heart containers and magic containers. This was actually the first game to introduce a magic meter as well as spells that you can use. And, of course, you can find the containers to grow your magic bar and your life. And as you level up, you can upgrade your magic, which will use up less points per spell. You can upgrade your life so you take less damage, and of course you can upgrade the attacks that you do to enemies with your sword. Additionally, there are some towns in the game where you can even meet up with swordsmen who will teach you new sword skills that you can use against your enemies. You can help people in each town, and when you do so, they'll have a wizard teach you a new spell, and these spells cover a pretty wide variety of things. You can get a shield spell that'll make it so you take less damage on the screen you're on. You can get a jump spell, which will let you jump super high for the duration of the screen you're on. There's a spell to recover life. There's even a spell to transform into a fairy if there's something that's too high to reach, or you want to fly through the keyholes in the dungeon, which will save you the trouble of going and finding a key. The game also makes NPCs a much larger part of the experience. There were very few of them in the original game, and they really didn't do a whole lot outside of give you a few basic hints. Here, you're going to want to talk to everybody that you encounter in the towns because you can get some valuable tips that'll make it easier to figure out where you're progressing and what you'll have to do next. The items that you get in this game, for the most part, aren't items that you actually use in battle. They're just, like, always-on items. Like, you can get a candle, which will make it so that caves are brighter and you can actually see the enemies in them, which you couldn't see otherwise. You can get a glove that allows you to destroy blocks with your sword. There's a raft for traversing the world, a whistle that you can use for certain obstacles and potential puzzles that you have to solve, winged boots so that you can walk across certain patches of water, a cross which will make invisible enemies visible, and even a hammer so you can destroy big boulders that are blocking the road. This has largely been called the black sheep game of the Zelda franchise, but how does it hold up all these years later? The game certainly has a few flaws, I won't deny that, and we'll look at those later, but overall I thought this was a very good, even if it is different, installment in the Zelda franchise. It does introduce several elements which would play major roles later in the franchise, namely the improved role of NPCs and the use of magic. There's at least a little bit more of a plot this time. Granted, you pretty much have to read the instruction manual to get the most of it, but I appreciate the improved roles of NPCs and the role that towns play in the game. If you notice, the towns actually bear the name of characters from Ocarina of Time, namely several of the sages that you encountered in that game. The game is a little less open and non-linear than the first game was, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it's a little easier to narrow down what you're supposed to do, although there is still some degree of flexibility as to the order in which you can tackle certain challenges. Every gamer is going to go about this slightly differently, so it's nice that you at least still have some degree of flexibility when you play this game. I thought that the addition of magic was definitely one of the greatest things this game brought into the series, although I won't deny the game does have a few problems. You only ever have one sword throughout the game, and that you just upgrade the attack power of that one sword. The sword is ridiculously short, so you find yourself having a tough time fighting enemies, and like in the first game, if you have full life, you can fire beams from the tip of your sword, but the beams have extremely limited range, and they don't harm most of the tougher enemies, so that element is largely useless, sadly. Another disappointment is that they introduced the lives system in this game. It's never been used in any Zelda game since, and it's not hard to see why. You get a game over, like I said, you go back to North Castle at the beginning of the game, so you got to begin the really long trek across Hyrule just to get back to where you were and what you were doing before. If you make it to the absolute final temple in the game, the Great Temple where the Triforce of Courage is hidden, you can continue and just start from the palace itself, but I don't understand why this option wasn't included for the other palaces in the game, or even certain, cave entrances in towns. If you'd been able to save the game in more than one location, it would have made it a lot easier, and it would have made it easier to work around the live system. They tried to counteract this by including some 1-up dolls that you can get in the game, but the problem with those is the 1-up dolls do not regenerate. You can only get them once, and as such, a lot of gamers like to wait and go back and get those when it's time to go tackle the Great Palace, and honestly, I found that to be a pretty good strategy myself. So if you want to avoid those, save your game and just get them at the end of the game. It can come in handy, especially considering how treacherous that trek just to reach the final palace is. The difficulty level tends to be inconsistent, and there are quite a few surprises, and they're not always of the best variety. You will find yourself dying several very cheap deaths in this game. It seems like you get hit by some little nothing attack, but it knocks you into a pit and you die instantly, and believe me, as much as I like this game, it is going to frustrate you on more than a few occasions. Thank the powers that be for save states on modern reissues and retro consoles. I largely played this on my NES Classic, and of course I was using those save states left and right just because this game can be a real hassle at times. Despite that, though, I do absolutely love it. It is one of my favorites in the series, even if it never quite gets a lot of respect from other gamers and critics. What do you think of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link? Is it one of your favorites in the series? Are you not a fan? Do you think it's an underrated classic? Comment down below and let me know what you think, because I'd love to hear your opinion on this one. Also, subscribe to my channel and remember to like this video if you found it helpful. I'm Taylor T. Carlson, and I will see you in my next video game review.